you for joining us for today's Ipsos webinar, exploring the media preferences and habits of the always connected Gen Z. Today's presentation is being given by experts from our online communities research team, and you can read more about them on the slide in front of you. Okay, so now without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's first speaker, Amber Jawaid, Senior Vice President with Ipsos Online Communities. Amber, you have the floor.
Great. Hello, everyone. It is very nice to be here. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Amber Jawaid. I have been in this space for close to 20 years, and I've been with Ipsos for almost a decade, which is always hard to hear when you say it out loud. My focus here has been on tech, media, and finance, and I have led down some very inspiring, unique paths. I think the general evolution of communities within market research has really, led to my drive of innovation and kind of continuing to stay on top of trends. So I'm excited to be here today to share some of these insights, and I have here two of my colleagues who I will let them say hello.
Hi, I'm Holly Lake Hoagland. I'm a director here at Ipsos's Online Communities. I have a deep, passionate love for both technology and media, as well as over 15 years of experience using research to dig into what motivates people and help them solve their problems.
Hello, I'm Cody Webster. I'm a community manager with Ipsos Online Communities and been with Ipsos for about 5 years now, worked through various service lines. I have a passion for unlocking insights through qualitative and quantitative research, which is now why I reside in online communities, because I can practice both regularly.
Great, so we're gonna jump right in, and for this next section, we will be off camera so we can focus on the content here. So if you're here, you are probably curious to understand how Gen Z interact and relate to media and long form streaming. Is this guy actually falling? The short answer is no. So today we're excited, Cody and I and Holly, to take you through what our findings have been for Gen Z as it relates to media consumption. What you will take away from our webinar, we hope, will be how Gen Z define themselves. They are digital natives, they are tech savvy, they have an open mind and are authentic to who they are, or at least that is certainly what they strive to do. You hopefully will walk away with Gen Z's media consumption habits and learning that they're not actually so different than most. They're not unsubscribing less, they're not watching less. If anything, they're actually more open to non-traditional forms of media, like creator content on social. And then lastly, which is our other main finding around digital human connection through the eyes of Gen Z. This is all about authenticity and a two-way dialogue. Creating a sense of community for Gen Z truly goes a long way. And of course, you're here. What does this mean for you if you are thinking about your brand, you're a streaming service, you're a marketer, or you're just interested in learning more about Gen Z? We will certainly get to that as we wrap up with key findings and ways to prepare for the future. So as we've mentioned, we're excited to share these insights and really taking a deeper lens into Gen Z behavior. Our goal was to bring a holistic picture and understanding of who Gen Z are and how and why they make certain decisions. So for today's purposes, we're defining Gen Z as those aged 13 to 26, and our deep dive lens specifically looked at those aged 13 to 17. To actually get here, we utilized 3 of our syndicated online communities, from a more traditional quantitative approach in a survey format to deep dive qualitative diaries. So we started out with Fresh Lab, which has 6,000 Gen Pop members aged 18 plus. From there, we took a deep dive lens in our Club Z community, which is a few hundred members of 13 to 17-year-olds, to really look at what we saw in quant and dive a little bit deeper into a qualitative discussion board, getting their point of view. And then finally, we have a Lens of Influencers community, which is all about original content creators in a range of many verticals with a range of followers, truly to validate and understand how influencers and original content creators look at their own brand and their followers. And before we get right into the findings, we did just want to be on the same page in terms of how we are defining a couple of things. So long form streaming includes subscription video on demand like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon, ad-supported video on demand like Peacock Free, Tubi, Pluto TV, transactional video on demand like pay-per-view, live TV, and then non-traditional media we are looking at as podcasts, video game streams like Twitch, and then influencer created content that you might find on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. So let's jump in with Gen Z and how they define themselves. So Gen Z tend to be more open-minded about themselves. But I will say I don't think that means that they are very different from other generations. One thing to consider is the impact on life stage as a Gen Z. So they are relatively still young. They're part of this cohort that's already in full swing of full-time jobs. They're establishing roots. Married Gen Z tend to reflect similar tendencies as married millennials and are more likely to emphasize that media consumption is about their human connection and part of their routine self-care. We asked Gen Z to define themselves and what it means to be a digital native. We also asked them to create some memes that we've shared here. They were meant to express their personal brand. So hopefully you guys can take a look at the two examples here. For Gen Z, they care about intrinsic relationship with digital technology and the internet. They're open-minded and sensitive to diversity and inclusivity. They find themselves unique by their inherent use of technology, which in turn has influenced the evolution of communication, learning, and entertainment, and then how those are approached. I'd say overall they feel empowered to be themselves, but in an authentic way, and they don't actually just see this for themselves, but for others and even brands. So in these two memes, you can kind of see how they start to express their personal brands and what it means to them. And a great quote we wanted to include: I think Gen Z is more open-minded. We like to use a lot of technology and overall want everyone to feel welcome. So from previous research at Ipsos, we know that they have very deep roots in media and technology, and Gen Z actually agreed to this. They are true digital natives. They find it easy to operate with digital technology. Access to tech at a young age has given this generation a very intuitive understanding of how all these things work. The influence of digital communication is so intrinsically woven in their identity and lifestyle, it confirms and strengthens their position as digital natives. It is truly deeply rooted in their day-to-day. Here's a great quote to kind of sum that up. I think we just use it for everything. If we need info, we Google it. If we want to watch something, we stream it. We can video call and talk to people anywhere. So of course, this naturally leads to how tech savvy they are. They have intrinsic knowledge of digital technology. One really great quote for this: being a digital native to me means from earliest age, we have been exposed to the internet, to social networks, and to mobile systems. For Gen Z, these two are the same, but how does this information translate into their media behaviors? My colleague Cody is going to take you through those findings.
Thank you, Albert. As in any good research practice, we use two questions to unpeel front stage and backstage realities of community members' media behaviors. First, we asked them to rank a slew of media types by preference, and what we found was that regardless of generation, subscription video on demand ranked number one, often shortly followed by live TV. But to dig in deeper, our second question asked the respondents what would they do with an extra hour in a day to consume media. We found a few interesting things when looking at the real versus projected answers. The good news is that most still prefer long-form streaming. We did find over a third would do something different than their number one preferred media. And for some Gen Z, they were 5 times more likely to access non-traditional media than previously stated. And they also shared that they want an equal mix of professionally produced and influencer created content. But when it comes to subscriptions, how different are they? We found that Gen Z subscribes to on average 6 streaming services, and this is at least as many, if not more, than other generations. Similarly, we saw millennials on average also subscribe to 6 streaming services, reaffirming for younger consumers it's not an either or choice for long-form streaming subscriptions, it's an addition to. This led us to further investigate what drives community members to subscribe to long-form streaming services, and we found for a little over half of Gen Z, exclusive content is still the largest motivator for subscribing. However, when comparing to other generations, we see that Gen Z are more influenced by their human connections, such as recommendations from friends and family and social trends, which leads to the emotional piece that keeps them around, using media to stay connected with people. When we asked them to describe what they would do with that extra hour in their day, just about over half of the community members also included information not only on what they would do, but why. Overall, Gen Z are driven by their need to stay current with their favorite show or influencer, but above all, they want to stay connected with their pod. As shown by one Gen Z respondent, their reasoning for choosing their medium is not only specific to their content preference, but who they share that experience with. I always watch shows and movies with my mom. We always listen to music together. We are best friends.
I think that's a great point and quote, Cody. An interesting story kind of revealed itself when we dug into this theme of connect with people. In fact, it turned out the idea of connecting with people broke down into 2 aspects. And the first is connecting and sharing with those closest to us, creating the bonds that bind us. And the second was connecting with others in a way that helps us connect with ourselves. So we're going to start with the easiest one first, connecting with those we hold dear. As humans, we're social creatures, and that makes us driven to recognize similarities and share experiences with people as part of group bonding, whether that's our family, our friends, or even those we share interests with on the internet. And as discussed earlier, media and technology are imprinted on Gen Z at the earliest stages of their development, and part of what makes Gen Z, Gen Z. So for these digital natives, media and tech play a significant role in creating their pods or their in-groups. Technology is not just for entertainment, but also socializing and maintaining relationships. It's how communication occurs. The idea that in-person communication is the best is no longer true. Combining that embedded tech savvy of Gen Z with spending a significant part of their development time in lockdown during the pandemic, Gen Z create and connect with their pods anytime, anywhere. For Gen Z, communications are multi-channel. They're adept at using different platforms based on the target audience and the purpose. They aren't going to use the same channels to connect with their grandparents as they would their peers. And even those vary by who and what they're communicating about. Finally, Gen Z view media as a shared experience, watching content together and sharing their thoughts on media they consume through multiple avenues. So how does this all fit together? I think one community member said it very well. For a few years, and due to the pandemic, I learned to share information, memes, comments, and more with my friends or family through apps for my social networks, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, in addition to using video calls on Zoom or Skype on my home devices. Because this technology keeps me connected with my loved ones without problems caused by distance. Now, the other question now is, does this theme of connection remain true when we look at how Gen Z describe their favorite mediums? We asked the community members to give us 3 words to describe their #1 ranked medium, and conducted some text analysis to pull out themes on what they find appealing about each. Given that Gen Z wants both professionally produced and influencer created content in equal measure, we wanted to understand if there were any major differences between these 2 categories. So namely, we looked at subscription video on demand and influencer created content. What we found was that fun and original content are big factors for both. And there are obvious functional needs Gen Z get from their subscriptions of video on demand. But the overwhelming emotional connections come with influencer related content. In particular, Gen Z is looking for inspiring and relatable content. But we also wanted to understand, what do these concepts really mean? To answer that, we asked Gen Z participants to define what relatable and inspiring content, not just from influencers, but overall, mean to them. And what we found is that the emotional factors tie into that second theme of connecting with others in a way that helps us connect with ourselves. Relatable content means something that they can personally identify with, the themes, the characters, or the scenarios, or a story that reflects their own experiences, lifestyle, or interests. It can also mean overcoming adversity. And on the other hand, that inspiring means motivations, looking for new insights, finding ways to influence people to act or think differently and achieve their goals. In many ways, this relatable and inspiring content help people feel not alone, that there are others out there like them with the same interests, experiences, aspirations, and even struggles. Because influencer created content in particular is a 2-way relationship, we wanted to get influencers' perspective on these ideas as well. So we tapped into our exclusive influencer community through a discussion board. And the goal of that board was to understand what those emotional connections with followers and their own brand mean, and how this translates to coming to the table with authenticity for who they are and what they promote and share across social media. Now, relationship building is vital. Influencers emphasize that the relationship with their followers takes a lot of attention to both people and details. Now, it means responding to direct messages and comments for sure, but it also really usually means engaging with who the people are, remembering comments that they made that tie into current conversations, calling people out by their name or their handle, making that feel personal. And some of the influencers even try to remember things like birthdays or special events of their prolific or vocal followers. And this means that all these interactions need to feel personal and natural. And this is particularly important when engaging with Gen Z, because they can spot a fake a mile away. Now, relatability and inspiration can't be forced. You can't aim for those things. Not only are there too many variables to calculate in that equation, it's not authentic. Instead, creators often strive to be as human and open about themselves as possible, who they are, what their struggles are, their celebrations, as well as their thoughts and their opinions. So now we kind of have a lay of the land. Let's take a look at what all of this means for the continuation of long-form streaming services and Gen Z.
We asked Gen Z what would make their streaming video on demand experience even better. There were 2 themes, one about the experience watching together and another about connecting their experience beyond watching. I'll start with the first theme, improving experiences watching together. Those currently using watch party features share that they're clunky and need improvements. Others were completely unaware of these features and use other apps to watch and discuss content together. So what are some of the ideas that Gen Z have to improve their experiences? Seamless features that make it easier to feel like they are together in the same space. This includes technical features like improved chat, camera options, better chat audio, all things that make communications to be less intrusive or inconvenient for all involved. As one watch party user shared, even when it's working, it's hard to send a message and still pay attention to the movie, and pausing the movie will interrupt the flow for everyone. Now let's dive into the second theme. It's more than just watching together. It's about the entire ecosystem of the experience. Some suggest having a network within the streaming service itself to make it easier to connect with family, friends, and others. This would also make it easier to see what friends and family are watching, share trailers, write reviews, or comment on shows they think others would like. Another option is to leverage pre-existing social channels or make it more obvious where those capabilities already exist. This would utilize the multi-channel behavior that we see from Gen Z. As one shared, I would like to have a platform where I can show my friend what I'm watching on Netflix while I'm on Snapchat so I can talk to them about the show that I'm watching. Or from another user, I think that being able to share what we've watched would be a good way to stay in touch.
So now we know more about Gen Z and their media consumption. We know media and streaming are at the core of Gen Z's identity and tied to their emotions and that sense of togetherness. We know that media is a shared experience that extends beyond the act of watching to that entire ecosystem, and that Gen Z wants the ability to use multi-channel communications. But what can brands and streaming services do about this information? More broadly, brands and streaming services can think about how they communicate. Many of the choices and the consumption behaviors in the study emphasize Gen Z's driven by their people and that emotional connection created by sharing, not just during consumption, but even before and after. Also, Gen Z wants to be talked to and engaged in the conversation rather than directed. Additionally, Gen Z, above all other generations, do not draw lines between professionally produced and influencer content. Gen Z entwine marketing with the influencers that conduct it, and consequently are more likely to take critiques with a grain of salt and be more broadly supportive of brands. In the long run, it's both people and media to them. While streaming services can take a look at addressing functional aspects of the platforms, media is a shared experience, so making watch parties or ways to watch together more immersive. Looking at those additional features like social networks, better chats, audio and video features to make that shared experience seamless, actually feel shared and less disruptive. And for Gen Z, the media experience doesn't end when the show is over. It continues on in that digital version of the water cooler where people want to discuss and share something meaningful to them. Brands and streaming services can either look at partnering with platforms Gen Z is already using. You can take a look at the success that a lot of video game streaming services and Discord have put together, or they can build these applications in-house. But the big issue is brands need to think hard about how to look at that human relationship and how to make the shared viewing experience more natural and in the flow of Gen Z's behaviors. Now, thank you all for your time. It looks like we have a question coming in.
Great, so I'm just taking a look at questions. We can jump back on camera. So this first question here is, were there any interesting similarities or differences with any of the other generations?
There's definitely some distinct differences we saw between different generations depending on the question. I think the groups that were closest was Gen Z and millennials, especially when we take that if they're in the same kind of life stage together. So they started to see similar patterns and what drove them, as well as kind of how they consumed things along those lines. But there's a couple of interesting kind of differences with like boomers in particular. So when looking at that purpose question, they were the group most likely to seek media for informational purposes. That's a wide range of options, but like history, documentaries, something that they're going to learn something new, as well as a predisposition towards news consumption. So that was a big one with them. On the other hand, Gen X tried to emphasize that a lot of it was about personal self-care when they were doing media consumption as well. It was about their relaxation, about what kind of day they had and how they recharged themselves.
Great, I don't think I see any other questions coming through. Just take a look here. So we have actually one more question that just came through. Give me 1 second to read this here. So one question is, did they define authenticity or what they believe is authentic?
I'm assuming you're meaning the influencers, probably.
Yeah, it looks like, yes.
They did not exactly define it in this particular study, but they did mention the idea of authenticity with how they engaged, without actually giving it a straight definition. So, but about being open, and that kind of translated into a lot of what they said was authentic.
Yeah, and I think Gen Z certainly did define authentic as well as just the, an alternate viewpoint, which is the ability for them to relate in something that, they can then see themselves in. So even if it is an influencer they don't know, if they are talking about content or put ideas out there that is relatable to a Gen Z person, that is authentic. Just looking at a couple other questions here. You mentioned on-demand content being valuable. Did you hear more about any appeal for big live events like Tentpole, Oscars, Super Bowl, etc.? I don't think we did specifically. That certainly is something that our team can dig back in and follow up. Perhaps there were some comments specific to that. So that's an area we can circle back on via email. And let's see if I have some other questions here. I think those might be the couple that have come in. So with that, I will just say that, we're happy that you've taken some time to join us today. Kind of had a short and sweet webinar. Hopefully you've taken some great key findings. We will be following up with everyone through email for the webinar. And of course, if there are additional questions that you have, we're happy to follow up via email individually as well. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.